more. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. But as for you, you thought it evil. Everybody say, you thought it evil. But God, he meant it for good, to bring to pass, as it is to this day, that I could save many people. God had a purpose bigger than what you thought. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, same thing. And we know that all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord. Okay? And then John chapter 5, after these were a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. Now there at Jerusalem by the sheep market, a pool. There's my pool. I finally got my pool. It's in the Bible. Sheep market, a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of folks, impotent folks, and blind, halt, withered. They had issues, right? And they were waiting on the moving of the water, for an angel went down a certain season into the pool, and he troubled the water. And whosoever was the first to get into the troubling of the water, and he stepped in the water, he was made whole of whatever disease he had. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity for 38 years. Everybody say 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and he knew that he had now been a long time in this situation, Jesus said, will you be made whole? And the man said unto him, Sir, I don't have anybody. I'm all alone. And when the water is troubled, everybody beats me to the pool, and I miss out. And Jesus said unto him, Rise up, take your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole. And he took his bed and he walked. So I want to spend just a few minutes or however long talking about being stuck. You can be seated. Thank you for the standing. I told you this the other day, or last Wednesday night, but I have developed, Luke, this, I guess it's a phobia. Is that what it is? Is this the definition? Can anybody be a counselor up back in the pews and tell me? I was never like that, Lori. I never had a problem with adrenaline things and crazy. I would ride roller coasters and did all kind of stuff and was not afraid of things of heights or stuff like that. But I've developed, Riker, this fear of being stuck. What is stuck? It's the inability to move. It's the inability to change where you're at. There's synonyms for stuck, Jude, is being bogged down. Like just bogged down. I remember after Katrina, I went to Chalmette to help clean out some houses. And in that process, we would get into that mud, Sister Riker, and some of that mud that had been mixed with that Murphy oil spill. And you would step into that swamp water, that swamp mud mixed with oil. And then you try to pick your boot up. You had those rubber boots on, and those boots would stick. And if you didn't keep your toes pointed up, straight up, you weren't able to get that boot back out that water. It's that being bogged down. It's the grinding to a halt. It's to getting stuck in the mire, is what the Bible talks about. And it's just being unable to move. I remember we went to Disney World. And we went to Disney World, and I love Star Wars. Y'all know I'm a Star Wars fan. I have been a Star Wars fan since I was a kid. I'd be wealthy if I would have kept all those toys that I got rid of and gave them to somebody in my neighborhood thinking I was doing a good deed, and now I'm poor. But I had all the Star Wars toys, the originals, and I was a huge Star Wars fan. So we went to Disney World. This is before all the new Star Wars rides, if you've gone recently, but I went to Disney World, and the original Star Wars ride is called, does anybody know what it's called? It's called Star Tours. Anybody ever rode it? Been to Disney World? Star Tours. And all it does is you get in, Luke, and it's like it's a rectangle box, and you go in on one side, and there's 3 like theater rows, maybe 3 or 4 theater, so it looks like a little mini theater with a big screen. And when you walk in the one door, you all get into there and you find your seat, and there's another exit door, and that door closed. And we all got in, and it was a ton of people, Kane, and we got into that ride, and all of a sudden I was in and I was getting ready to sit, and that door on the right went closed. Boom. And when it closed, I looked around, and my wife's my witness. I looked to my left, and that door was locked. And I looked to my right, and that door was locked. And I had a panic attack that I felt I was stuck in Star Tours. And I'm sweating. I'm like, I want to get out. I looked at Leisha, and I said, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And she's like, sit down. She's fussing at me, yelling at me, threatening me. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And she's like, sit down. And so I sit down and I close my eyes through all of Star Tours, and I just sit there and I close my just sweating like crazy. Didn't even look at one thing that happened in Star Tours. And as soon as it ended, Brother Ray, that door opened, and I'm like kicking people and knocking people over. I left my children with Leisha, and I got out because I felt stuck. Being stuck can mean a lot of different things in reality. Right now, you may be feeling stuck in your current job. Maybe you feel stuck in your employment. You can't resign, or you can't find a better job, or perhaps you just can't find any happiness in your current job. You just kind of feel stuck. Got to pay my bills, and I'm just not happy, just stuck. Maybe you're stuck, Kelly, with a problem that you can't get through. You could be stuck in a relationship or a friendship that you feel would be best to cut off, but you just can't seem to bring yourself to that realization that needs to stop, and I need to sever that and cut it off. And you just feel stuck in a problem that you just can't get through, and you don't know how it's ever going to get better. Perhaps your definition of stuck is something less mental and more physical. Maybe you've been stuck in traffic and you've lost your mind as you've stared at brake lights that do not move and you feel stuck. Maybe you're sitting on the interstate and those brake lights are driving you absolutely insane because all you can think about is that you want to get home to your family or get to church where you're trying to quickly make it, and you're just stuck. Maybe you've been stuck in your house and you just don't have anything to do and you feel like no purpose, and you just sit around the house and you watch Netflix and eat ice cream because you just feel stuck. To be stuck, Sister Eames, is to be trapped in something. It's to be trapped. It's to have dug your tires in the mud kind of mentality. And your tires just get deeper and deeper and deeper, and mud just slings, and everybody gets all messed up because you're just stuck. This ain't in my notes, but we get stuck, and all of a sudden we're slinging mud on everybody around us. We're slinging bad attitudes, and we're slinging gossip, and we're slinging hate and anger. And the reality is we're just stuck and frustrated and ticked off or whatever, and we're just slinging it because we're just digging those tires deeper in the mud. We're stomping on the gas, and we're pressing the gas and putting it in reverse, and pressing the gas on Sunday and putting it in drive on Wednesday, and pressing the gas, and we're getting deeper, and we're just stuck, and we're unable to free ourselves, and our tires just keep spinning and nothing happens. I come to church and I pray and I give and it just seems like nothing's happening. I'm just spinning and I'm stuck, and it's just causing me to be frustrated and annoyed. It is the feeling of being trapped, Brother Eames, that keeps people from reaching their potential. It's when you feel trapped, you don't reach your potential because you're like, what's the purpose? And I'll never get out of this situation. It'll never be different. I'll never get better. And I just feel stuck. But this is what I want. It's not the act of actually being trapped that's the problem. It's the feeling of being trapped. I already told you last week, you're not stuck, Chuck. You're not stuck. God's working on your behalf. It is not the actual act of being stuck that's the issue. It is the feeling of being stuck. It's the feeling of being stuck in this position, stuck in this situation, stuck in this circumstance. And because this is the way it is, this is the way it's always going to be, I just don't think it'll ever get better. He'll never take care of it. It'll never get right. It'll never be healed. I'll never be whole. I'll never find peace. And it's just I'm trying and nothing's working and I'm digging deeper and it just feels like I'm stuck. And you're not stuck. It's just the feeling of being stuck. Because the reality is we are only stuck because we believe that we're stuck. That makes sense? You're only stuck actually because you believe that you're stuck. Because with God, all things are possible. Nothing is impossible. There's a song, Reckless Love, that we sing. And there's no mountain too high, no valley, he'll come get you. There is not a wall, church, that cannot be gone through in Jesus Christ. And if you can't go through it, you can go around it. And if you can't go around it, you can go over it. And if you can't go over it, you can go under it. If I don't have a ladder and that doesn't work, then I'll get a shovel and that will work. The reality is this: there is nothing that you face in your life that God cannot help you, equip you, and empower you to get out of. He is on your side. There's no wall that's too high. There's no situation that's too bad. There is nothing that God cannot do. And so look at your neighbor and say, I'm not stuck, Chuck. In Genesis, we right off the bat, we get the story of Joseph. Right early on in Genesis, we start getting this story. In the first book of the Bible, we start getting the middle of Genesis, we start getting the story of Joseph. It's one of the first stories in the Bible. It's in the first book of the Bible. And it's a story, Cain, of being stuck. It's a stuck story. Joseph was a teenager. That's who he was. He had 11 brothers in himself. And those 11 brothers turned on him. And they were jealous and frustrated and didn't like him because of his dreams and his visions. And due to jealousy and envy, they plotted against him. And what led to this, the next chapters of Joseph's life, it led to a life that Joseph was stuck. It started out with him being stuck in a pit. And then it transitioned to him being stuck in Potiphar's house. And then it moved on to him being stuck in a prison. He was unable to move. His circumstances were moving his ability to get out. He couldn't get out the pit on his own. His tires were spinning. Mud was slinging. Nothing was happening in his life. In the pit, he had no option. He hadn't done anything. He didn't deserve the pit. He didn't deserve the situation that was found in his life, the circumstances, but he finds himself in a pit. He's stuck in a pit. He didn't have any options. In Potiphar's house, he did good. He did what was right. He tried to make the best of a bad situation, and guess what happened? He got stuck in scandal. He got stuck in lies. He got stuck in abuse. He got stuck. Same situation. In prison, he gets to prison and he tries to do the right thing. He tries to be kind. He tries to be godly. He tries to help those that are hurting around him. He tries to be a good man. And guess what? He gets stuck in prison. He gets forgotten over and over and over again. And each moment, he finds himself unable to move, unable to fix his current situation, and unable to make things better. He's just stuck. But remember, stuck was only in his mind, not in his reality. The reality, church, was God was orchestrating his steps for his good. In his mind, all he saw was a pit, a Potiphar's house, and a prison. But in the reality of the big picture, God's working and orchestrating all this out for his good. He didn't know any of that. He didn't have the Bible to read about his own story. He didn't know all these other things that were going on. He had no clue. All he knew is that he was in a pit one day, he was in Potiphar's house one day, and he was in a prison one day. He had no inkling that his fourth place was going to be a palace. He did not know that. And he didn't see it. He couldn't see it. But God is calling Joseph and calling this church to see beyond what we see. It's getting us to church to look with eyes of faith. Well, you don't know what kind of pit I'm in. You don't know what kind of despair I'm in. You don't know what kind of lies have been told about me. You don't know what kind of Potiphar's house I'm dealing with and scandals. You don't know what kind of prisons of depression and fear and addiction and all. You don't know what kind of pit that I've been thrown in. And God says, I need you to see with a little bit of faith. Because if you'll see with a little bit of faith, you will remember that you're not stuck. When you feel stuck, church, in the next 14 minutes, I want to give you two things. Number one, when you feel stuck, you've got to remember that God uses what the enemy intends for evil for your good. You got to remember it. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know all the chaos I'm dealing with. You don't know all the problems I'm going through. I don't. And you don't know mine. But you know what? I've got to believe that he's going to work all things together for the good of them that love the Lord. I've got to believe that all the things, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they are working together for my good. Joseph goes from a pit to a palace. He goes from sold into slavery by his brothers, faced years of hardship, betrayal, imprisonment, yet finally he rises to the second only to Pharaoh, the greatest man in Egypt, the greatest man in power at that time. Ultimately, he was put in that position to save his family and many others. There would not have been a nation of Israel if Joseph had not been in a pit. There would not have been saving for his family if he had not been thrown in prison. Church, what I'm trying to tell you is you're not stuck. And I'm telling myself, I'm not stuck. You may feel like nothing is going right and everything is against you. But you have got to remember that he is working all things out for your good. But I don't like it. That's okay. You don't have to like it. He didn't call us to like it. He called us to trust. That's it. He said, Joseph, I gave you a promise and I gave you a vision. So in the pit, trust me. In Potiphar's house, trust me. In a prison, trust me. You know why I believe Joseph was able to successfully navigate all of those scenarios? Because he never lost trust and faith in what God told him. And you know why he only went in one pit? Because he learned the lesson to trust the Lord. You know why he only went to one Potiphar's house? Because he learned to trust the Lord through chaos. And he went to one prison. I believe many, pulpit to pew, God puts us in the pit. We crawl ourselves out. Oh, God, you can do it. But we didn't learn the lesson, so we fall back in the pit. And then we get out of the pit and we get in Potiphar's house and we don't learn that lesson and we fall back in the Potiphar's house and we repeat the process over and over. And God says, I'm trying to teach you. That's the whole wilderness. He said, I'm trying to get you to learn to trust in me. Joseph recognized that what was meant for evil, God used it for good. So you know what, when you're feeling stuck, Luke, you know what you got to go to? You got to understand that God is going to use everything for your good. All things, Romans says. All things. All good things. All bad things. All indifferent things. All things I like. All things I don't like. All things God uses for the good of them that love the Lord. So what is my job? Sister Margaret, what's my job? To love the Lord. Love the Lord with all your, that's why it's the greatest commandment. Do you get how the Bible ties back to itself? It's the greatest commandment. What's the greatest commandment? To love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. Why is that so important? Because if you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, he will work all things together for the good of them that love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. What's the greatest commandment? To love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. Why? Because he will work all things out for the good of them that love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind. Do you get it? You just got to love him. That's why when people are, I told Sister Ann, I said, all I ask for people, I really don't have a lot of lists of things I ask. And this is the number one and probably the only thing. Consistently, faithfully, dependably come to church. That's it. That's my list. There it is. We have 2 church opportunities, Sundays and Wednesdays, and we offer groups. If you will just make up in your mind to do those things consistently, without fail, unless there's a tragic event or a vacation, then you're going to get through whatever you're going through. Because he's going to work things out for your good. It's easy to get disheartened when we face challenges. Yet God has a remarkable way of using, Lori, our trials for a greater purpose. This is what he does. I can't imagine. Can you for a moment in the next 9 minutes, can you imagine Joseph's mentality through all this? Can you imagine Joseph being thrown in a pit? Prison, Potiphar's house, false accusations, slander, being forgotten about, his own family abuse. Think about that. That's what he went through. And yet in all that, he ends it by saying in Genesis chapter 50, he says, God, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And he said it wasn't just for my good, but it was for the good of my family and for those around. So church, if you're feeling stuck in the pit of life, the prison of circumstance, or Potiphar's house of accusations, just remember Joseph. Number one, God's going to work things out for your good. Just remain faithful, and in time, you're going to see how God can turn your situation into a platform for his glory. That's number one. Number two, or actually this is number 3, because we did number 1 and 2 last week. Number 4, technically. Number 4, when you're dealing with being stuck, it's found in John that we read chapter 5, and that is when you are in what feels like a paralyzing circumstance, the only response you have is to wait on the Lord. When you're feeling like your dreams are falling apart and you feel like things are not working and you feel like things are going bad and your life is a pit, a prison, and a Potiphar, you just remember God works all things out for your good. And then the second thing, when you're feeling like you're stuck and you're spinning mud all over the place, you remember that sometimes when it feels like you can't move, don't move. Just wait. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. John chapter 5, we read the story of the paralyzed man at the pool of Bethesda. He was there. Near the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there's a pool, which we talked about. It's called Bethesda. There was a multitude of disabled people that waited for the stirring of the water, as it was believed an angel would descend at a certain time and stir the waters, and the healing waters would be stirred. And the first person that could get their toe into that water, Mike, were instantly healed. And then after that, it was over, and they would have to wait again for that stirring of the water. And we read in John chapter 5, among the men that was there was a man who had been paralyzed, Luke, for 38 years. When Jesus saw him, he had 38 years. 38 years, he got up, and guess what he did? He got to the pool. Maybe he just stayed at the pool. He just was there for 38 years. He didn't give up. He didn't throw in the towel. Now, he had lost a little faith because he couldn't seem to find anybody, but he was there at that pool for 38 years. The Bible says when Jesus saw him and he learned how long he had been in that condition, he simply asked him this. He said, "Do you want to be healed?" And the man's response, Robert, to that question about the pool was that he had no one to help him get to the pool. That was his response. And Jesus, he responded, do you want to be healed? I got no one to take me, sir. And Jesus' response was, get up, take your bed, and walk. And the Bible says instantly the man was healed. So what do you do when you feel stuck, John? Sometimes, church, you ready? This is for me because the Lord has been speaking this directly to me. Sometimes when you feel stuck, you are confusing being stuck with just learning to wait on God. Because we're impatient. God, do it, God, do it, God, do it, God, do it, God, do it. God's not doing it yet. Well, I got to go. Let me do this. Let me try this. Let me try this thing. God's saying, just take a chill pill and wait. Nobody likes the ER. Anybody likes going to the ER? Not just because it's an emergency room, but what is the worst thing about the ER? Waiting. You're sick. You're in desperate need. And they said, go find the seat right here. You know, your head's bleeding, your body's aching, and they're like, oh, go sit right here. And you've got to look at the ER wait line. It's 4 hours, and you're sitting there like, it's the waiting. Why do we hate traffic? Why do we hate traffic? We get to look at all these pretty cars. They're beautiful. We get to observe nature. Why do we hate traffic? Why? We don't like to wait. We don't want to wait. Why do we hate lines? Why do we hate lines at the grocery store? Why do we come into Walmart and start looking for the shortest line? And if you're like me, you pick the shortest line and that person has the most groceries. It's the truth. Why? Because we hate waiting. Come on, church, let's be honest. We don't like waiting. I have a book on God's waiting room. None of us like waiting. But the reality is this: you may feel stuck today. You may feel like you can't move or things aren't getting better. And it may not be that you're stuck. It may just be that God wants you to just chill. And just wait. The man at the pool, he was not stuck. Think about this for me. He was not stuck, Charles. He was not stuck, Charles. He was not just there with nothing to do. He was not stuck. And most of all, Robert, he was not alone. You ready? He said, I couldn't have anybody show up. I didn't have anybody show up. Nobody's here for me. And he said, I'm alone. He was not alone. And he was not stuck. He was just waiting on Jesus to show up. Yeah. As we all stand, I'm done. How many of us today, you feel stuck? You feel like you can't move. You feel like you can't get going. You feel like nothing's working. But maybe, just maybe, can I open up your eyes that you are waiting on God to show up. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe you're just waiting for the opportunity for God to show up, angel, in your behalf and to show out his power and his glory and his might and his majesty and his wonder. Maybe it's not that I'm stuck. It's that I'm just waiting for God to meet me in my situation. And so while I wait, I'm going to operate in faith. Right. So what am I going to do? Church, I'm going to stay by the pool. Waiting doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you consistently take small steps in faith. Even if it's just, I'm going to keep coming to church every time the doors are open, and I'm waiting on God to heal my body, and I'm waiting on God to deliver my mind, and I'm waiting on God to set my family free, and I'm waiting on God to bring some joy in my life, and I'm waiting on God to do the financial work in my life. Maybe I feel stuck, but maybe I'm just waiting. So as I wait, I'm going to keep coming to church, and I'm going to keep lifting my hands, and I'm going to keep praising God, and I'm going to keep worshiping God, and I'm going to keep loving God, and I'm going to keep reading my Bible, and I'm just going to keep going. And all the while, Luke, you're waiting, and you feel stuck, but you're just waiting. You're just waiting. Waiting on what? There's an old song we used to sing. There's a promise coming down that dusty road. How's it go? Audrey, you know it? Come sing it with me. With his holy hands, healing virtue flows. He's got the key to what you need. Death and hell has been defeated. There's a promise coming down that dusty road. Look, all you got to do is stay on the road. You got to stay by the pool. You just got to stay in the house of God. You just got to say, I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to throw in the towel. I'm not going to get out. I'm not going to backslide. I'm not going to quit coming. I'm just going to keep staying by the pool. I'm going to keep showing up at pool hours, whatever the pool hours. If it's 38 years, I'm showing up at the pool hours, because at one moment, there's a promise coming down that dusty road. And his name is Jesus. And whatever you feel, you're not stuck. And dear Lord, you're not alone. Jesus says, I'm coming. And he's coming at the right time, at the right moment. Think about this. That man for 38 years, if he would have got healed prior to the birth of Jesus and his ministry, he would have just thought it was the water. He had a personal encounter with the Almighty God. All because he stayed by the pool and he kept the faith. So church, maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you don't feel stuck. Maybe you will feel stuck one day. This mentality of that you cannot move. You cannot get out. When you feel that way, remember Joseph, that he works all things for your good. And then sometimes, church, when you're feeling stuck, it may just be that God's telling you to wait. Would you bow your heads? Lord, thank you for this word. Thank you for this group. Thank you for these people. Thank you for this day, this opportunity to be here, to worship, to love you, to live for you, to serve you. God, as we struggle with this no way out mentality, help us to remember that you're going to take evil and you're going to turn it for good. That you're going to take all things, good, bad, and ugly, and you're going to turn them for the good of them that love the Lord. So I need to obey the first commandment, which is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, because you're going to work things out for the good of them that love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. And God, when I'm feeling stuck,